Thank you all for coming. I'm not going to say too much. I'm going to turn it over to the people who should be welcoming you all here. Please help me welcome Jehangir's parents, Leila and Jamil.
Hello everybody, welcome today. Thank you for coming. It's a pleasure to be with you all here today. We are remembering Jehangir today through music, poetry, and lots of things that he had passion with. I remember taking his the djembe, the tablas to his second home with Rachel and Grace at St. Michael's Hospital. We are going to have a great time today, so thank you again for coming in. Thank you.
We have carpets in the front, so please sit down on the carpets and enjoy yourselves, okay? Today would have not happened had it not been for Jasmine, for Kareem, for Alim, and for Imran, and for lots of other friends and family. So thank you very much. There's lots of food. You cannot go home hungry. No naughty bags. Okay? Enjoy. Thank you.
We wanted to have a little bit of poetry recited, some of which was written by Jehangir himself, and some of which we find appropriate for today's occasion. And I believe I'm looking for Dr. Stephenson. So for those of you who don't know, Dr. Stephenson is, was one of Jehangir's physicians at St. Mike's. And before I continue, I should say thank you to the St. Mike's community for their many, many years of care. Not just because they took such great care of Jehangir, even to his final days and final hours, but they let him get away with a lot of stuff. And if you look around the room, there were many times in which there was a room on 6th Bond that looked exactly like this, and you wonder how people do that, but we won't tell them about that time we cooked food in a crock pot and all that kind of
stuff. No. We know already. Thanks for inviting me to speak. I want to just say that I'm always telling my kids how much I love my job, and I hope I can say this speech without grace. Help me. Because as a CF doctor, you have the opportunity to meet a lot of fantastic people. And it's not just a job where you see people once in a while. You get to know them well, you see them frequently, and you develop a special bond with the patients and their families. And that's what I love the most about my job. This is going to be tough. Okay. So I may just, I usually try not to read things, but I may just have to read this. I hope you understand. So as a CF doctor, I consider myself very lucky because I have the opportunity to really get to know my patients because we see them so often. It's one of the reasons why I love my job, because we have meaningful long-term relationships with our patients, such as Jehangir. He touched all of our lives, and speaking for the whole CF team, we miss him very much. When I first met Jehangir, I felt like I had an immediate connection. I learned that he did his undergraduate degree in philosophy, which my husband also did. And I often joked with him about how I never could understand any of that esoteric stuff. And I still don't know the difference between Hegel and a bagel, except that bagels taste better. I always smiled when Jehangir was in hospital because he had those little philosopher puppets that would sit on his IV pole and watch over him. Perhaps studying philosophy makes you humble because Jehangir always considered others ahead of himself. One weekend when I was on call and at the hospital doing usual rounds, he told me that he was attending a wedding that day. And we were talking about all the fabulous food, some of which we've had today, that would be there. And he offered to bring me back some so I could have some the next day when I was rounding on the inpatients. Somehow I thought asking for a doggy bag at a wedding was a little too much. So I said, no, it's okay. But just the fact that he thought of that really was touching. Or in clinic, he would say, I just have one last question. Can I ask you one last question? And of course, he would say, do you have the time to answer it? Of course, I said, no problem. But inevitably, there were many other questions that followed, because Jehangir had many, many questions. And it was his incredible thoughtfulness, insightfulness, and intelligence that made him who he was. And he wanted to understand all the options that were available to him for his care. He was also a natural teacher. Each year, the CF team would present to the first-year medical students. And as part of that presentation, Jehangir willingly came and gave his perspective of what it's like to live with CF. He presented to the medical school class, which was 250 individuals. And his presentations were always very powerful and impactful. The audience would listen so quietly that you could hear a pin drop, which in med school is not always the case, because half the time people were not even listening to the person at the front of the room. I asked Dr. Tullis, who would have loved to have been here today but is out of town, if she had any thoughts that she wanted to share with us today. She said she was very touched with how Jehangir impressed on patients and doctors alike how difficult and yet how necessary it was for a person with CF to work every day of their lives on critical therapies, that you would do it every day only to get up the next day and do it all over again. This commitment is enormous, and Jehangir always did his treatments, sometimes to the point where we would tell him to do less treatments, which is another thing that doesn't happen very often. One memorable moment we have of him teaching not only the medical students but our own CF team was when he threw a peg light party in the inpatient ward. Now, for some of you who are not familiar with peg light, this is a salty tasting gross drink that we ask people to take when they do have bowel problems. Erin knows what it is. The bowel problems! When you mentioned that, I'm like, oh, that's good. We didn't even talk before this. But we ask patients to drink this stuff, and not just a glass, but actually about 8 liters of it in a fairly short period of time so that it will be effective. Well, Jehangir thought it would be a good idea to have the medical team come and actually drink the peg light with him. So he had this drinking party. He didn't make everybody drink 8 liters because he thought maybe it would be too much. They'd be going to the washroom a lot. But anyone who actually drank the peg light was given a name tag that said, I drank peg light and I liked it. Those that didn't know Jehangir probably wouldn't believe half of the things he managed to pull off while in the hospital. Erica, one of our physiotherapists, told me about the time when a well-seasoned weekend physiotherapist was treating Jehangir on a Sunday. Jehangir was talking about this party he had in his room the night before, that there was a DJ, and the DJ fit into the closet in his patient room. And the therapist said, okay, and then left the room and sought out the nurse immediately after making her note saying, the patient is delusional. She said, I think he's delirious. You better call the person on call. And the nurse said, oh, well, if it was Jehangir who said that, the party likely happened, and it was a pretty good one. Another story that Dr. Tullis told me was that she appreciated the late-night concerts he put on while he was admitted to hospital. His friends would come with a guitar or a clarinet, and he would play the percussion. At the same time, her father-in-law was actually admitted to 6 Bond, and so she was down the hall, and somehow she found it very comforting and gave her strength to hear live music at night. Everyone who knew Jehangir appreciated his great sense of humor. Sarah, one of the charge nurses on the ward, emailed me a story about Jehangir, knowing that I was talking today, saying that one time he came back to the hospital after going for a walk and getting some air. There were volunteers in the park across the street, which sometimes has some sketchy people in it, but he was out in the park, and these volunteers were giving bottles of water to homeless people, and they came up to him and said, would you like some water? And so he came back to Sarah and said, do I need my hair cut? Do I need a makeover? And so he laughed about that for weeks afterwards. I'm certain all of you could add to this talk with your own personal story of how he touched your lives. He was truly a special individual, and we will always remember him with deep fondness He will be missed but never forgotten.
Thank you, Dr. Steve. I will tell you that I was that DJ, and it was not a dream. It happened. It was probably the smallest room I've ever DJ'd in, but I'll give it to St. Mike's. It's a pretty big closet. I was able to stand in that closet, so it was fun. I think next we're going to have a performance, a very special performance. So the individuals I will introduce, I will say their names first before I forget. Razak and Noshad to my left here, and you will shortly all meet Neha, Shehzeen, and Kiran. They belong to a musical ensemble, I believe it's Toronto Tabla, right? And the MO Kathak? MDO. And for those of you who knew, I'd say the past year or so, maybe the last couple of years, Jehangir was part and felt very lucky to be part of this ensemble. And he took classes with them. And I believe these two gentlemen here are actually instructors of his. And he spoke very highly of them. Sorry, I had to give him my password for my laptop. I didn't want you all to hear it. And he spoke very highly of his tabla group. And he took a very special interest in it, and he loved it. And we thought if we had to have one performance here today, it would have to be these individuals and these two groups, because he had such a soft spot for them. He always claimed to be horrible at what he did in tabla, but I can tell you, as a person who used to perform alongside of him in other venues, he actually did have a certain degree of talent, a small amount of talent in his percussion, and he was very good at it. And today you'll notice there are drums all around the room, most of which actually belong to him. I won't say too much. I will let these gentlemen and these lovely young ladies who will be coming up in a moment to introduce themselves, and you can say as much as you want to. Please help me welcome all five of them.
I'll just explain briefly what we perform and why we're here. So, as mentioned, Jehangir was part of our group and a part of our classes. These were his teachers, and he actually performed with us at a wonderful show last Christmas, and it was such a beautiful experience for him to be part of our performance group and for all of us to work together and see him play too. So we train in the North Indian classical arts. We dance Kathak and tabla, of course. There's going to be some harmonium accompaniment. And we train, as mentioned, at the MDO school for Kathak and with the Toronto Tabla Ensemble. It's quite a large school, and there are many there, but everybody knew Jehangir. Everyone was very fond of him, and his dedication to his practice was so inspiring and so brave, and everybody has so many wonderful stories, of course, of meeting him, of seeing him in classes, him coming week after week with his medical apparatus, but just sitting there playing, practicing it, taking it very seriously, and it honestly inspired us to work harder and practice harder, because no matter what your physical, medical, any sort of limitations you have, this art form is for everyone, it suits everyone, and he made that very clear. So it was really beautiful to have him for the year, and even our gurus too, love him, appreciate him so much, and always be very fond of the memories we have. So I think I'm going to do one Kathak piece that actually Jehangir saw. I performed it last year at the Student Salon, where he performed it too, and he really liked it, so I'll do it here. And then Neha and Shehzeen will do a duet, and then we'll have a tabla harmonium piece. If there's time for another dance, we have a spare, but we'll see how it goes.
Sangareia, Jangadeiro Oi, rezadeira, faz com força a sua oração. Abençoa essa vila praieira para o ano deste
As I'm sure you guys know, Jehangir, just like us, was a student of Tabla. And what we're going to show you today is just a Tabla duet. So, as well as with music and dance, the Tabla is also has a solo form. So that's what we're going to show you today. And also, thank you to Kiran for accompanying us on short notice. So, get right into it.
That's awesome. How about one more round of applause for the dancers? Dancing and music was a big part of Jehangir's life. For those of you who ever had the pleasure of going out with him and clubbing, you knew that he knew how to dance in his own way. He could dance to hip hop, he could dance to rock. The only difference is he usually danced rock to hip hop music, and he danced hip hop music to rock music, but that's okay. We're going to have a couple words just from some of his colleagues. As you well know, he was a philosopher, or he claimed to be a philosopher. Sorry. But before I bring them up, I'm going to draw your attention to two things, because there have been a lot of questions about it. To my right and to my left, you'll see some messages that were written for Jehangir. And we've had a few questions today about what these messages actually are. And if you find Hannah today, Hannah, where are you? Wave. You want to come up and explain? No, she says no. But go talk to her at some point. She'll explain the actual meaning behind this. Those flags used to be their own pieces, those white pieces of fabric, and they were messages written for Jehangir in his final week at St. Mike's, and they were written as prayer flags, messages to get him better, to make him feel good, prayers, whatever you felt. And it was actually a really beautiful sight when it was put up in his room. Thank you, St. Mike's, for letting us get away with that as well. I've never seen an ICU room so well decorated. There were flags strewn throughout the room, and it was actually a really beautiful sight. And the nice part is,
many of you, or all of you, or most of you probably know, philosophy was a major part of Jehangir's life, major interest, and really a way that he lived. It was a kind of practice. Is it loud enough? Yeah? Okay. So philosophy was a major part of Jehangir's life, kind of way of life. He became interested in it, I think probably in high school or maybe shortly after that, and he studied it for many years, did his undergraduate work largely in philosophy. Later went on to do graduate work in philosophy. And so we thought that that should be represented today at the memorial. Philosophy as a whole, maybe, so a few words should be said about that. And so we've invited Kim Maclaren and David Ciavatta, who are two of Jehangir's teachers at Ryerson, where he studied, but also two friends, we think. And Jehangir often, we know actually, Jehangir spoke, and so just as our rationale for calling them out to speak. Before that, Niomi and myself, Alex, we'd like to say just a few words about our relationship to Jehangir as it related to philosophy. And we'll both read, because it is a little bit difficult to express these things. So, my name is Alex Shumarov. I've known Jehangir for about 10 years. We met in grade 11 in high school. The two of us shared many interests over the years, and philosophy was a major one of them. I think both of us, Jehangir and I, got into philosophy for a similar reason, or for a similar kind of paradox that we were both facing. I've tried to put my finger on what the two of us shared in philosophy, and I think we both did that, often in conversation and spending time together. On the one hand, we both had a strong need to understand how we were different from everyone and everything else. And I think it's probably a universal need, and everybody feels that at some point in their lives. That is to understand ourselves as individuals. And often our conversations, our discussions, the things that we would do would be oriented towards that. But on the other hand, we needed to know how that difference allowed us to belong together with others. And I think Jehangir in particular saw philosophy as a way of resolving this paradox. How do we, as separate people, separate entities, separate individuals, come into contact with other people? That was often, whether it was said or not, it was often there or it's probably always there in Jehangir's thinking. So what I want to say in brief is how much I've learned from him about facing up to my own difference, my own individuality, about accepting that difference and using it as a way of connecting to something larger than myself. So one place I learned this were the reading groups that Jehangir held over the years, and I think many of you participated in those reading groups. In them, he would bring together people who were otherwise so different from one another, people from different walks and stages of life, different cultural backgrounds, members of his close family, friends, and people that he barely knew. Another place I learned it was from long walks and conversations with Jehangir, in the hospital at 6 Bond, in the park around St. Michael's Hospital, or down by the harborfront, or up Yonge Street and towards Dundas Square and all over downtown, or Queen West. I think Jehangir really loved the city and found it as kind of opening up discussion and thinking. On those walks, we would learn about each other's differences and make small steps towards overcoming the boundary that separated us. Most of all, though, I learned this from Jehangir's courage. He was not afraid to say to others that he was different, and to explain to them in what ways he was different, and why that difference did not have to be the decisive thing, how that difference can be transcended. He was not afraid of the word illness, or rather, I think he was deeply afraid of it, but he had the courage to confront that fear. Over the last week, I have had the opportunity to read through much of Jehangir's poetry, looking forward to this memorial. Some of that we'll hear later today. Some of it is outside on one of the tables. And he left just an incredible amount of writing. Poetry, letters, some stories, emails. It just shows how much he valued relating to people and communication. And so I just want to read, before I hand this over to Niomi, and eventually to Kim and Dave, I want to read just a few of Jehangir's lines from a poem called Sadness. So Jehangir writes, "If there must be sadness, make it useful. Wear it like a costume, don't let it absorb into your body. Let it change and meld. Like your body, use this sadness for something. Let it be creative. Transfer the sadness to whatever you create. We are all a part of history. The breeze was that from so long ago. Sadness has its role to play. Use it and let it go outside to the night so it may cultivate in the ground and become something real.
Thanks, Alex. I met Jehangir in 2010, and I met him at a workshop facilitated by Kim Maclaren, who's going to speak in a few minutes. And the workshop was on the notion of intimacy in philosophy, and I think that was a really fitting place to become acquainted with Jehangir. And I'm not actually going to say very much about, my relationship to philosophy or my relationship to Jehangir, just that I feel incredibly indebted to him, and my relationship to philosophy is incredibly indebted to Jehangir in all the ways in which he supported and mentored me. So I'm gonna read an excerpt from one of the last books that we read in one of Jehangir's reading groups. So we read a book by a French philosopher named Jacques Derrida, and the book is called The Work of Mourning, and it's a collection of eulogies written about different philosophers. So I've chosen to read a eulogy from a section of a eulogy for Roland Barthes, another French philosopher. No, it's okay. So I'm going to read this short excerpt, and then I'm going to close with a quotation by one of Jehangir's, favorite philosophers probably isn't the right word, but a philosopher we spent a lot of time talking about, and I'll introduce that after. So this is a quote from Derrida. These thoughts are for him, for Roland Barthes, meaning that I think of him and about him, not only of or about his work. For him also suggests that I would like to dedicate these thoughts to him, give them to him, and destine them for him. Yet they will no longer reach him, and this must be the starting point of my reflection. They can no longer reach him, reach all the way to him, assuming they ever could have while he was still living. So where do they go? To whom and for whom? Only for him in me, in you, in us? For these are not the same thing, already so many different instances, and as soon as he is in another, the other is no longer the same. I mean the same as himself. So I'm just gonna, I have to talk into the microphone, right? Yeah. So this is the final paragraph from a work by Maurice Merleau-Ponty, and Jehangir spent a lot of time talking about and thinking about and reading this book, and a lot of us have spent a lot of time talking and thinking and reading this book with him. You reside in your very act. You are your act. You give yourself in exchange. Your significations shine forth dazzlingly. It is your duty, your hatred, your love, your loyalty, your creativity. Man is a knot of relations, and relations alone count for man. Okay, so maybe David Ciavatta and Kim Maclaren, you guys want to come up? Yeah, you can come too. So while Kim and David are making their way up here, I'll just say a quick introduction for those of you who haven't made their acquaintance before. So Kim Maclaren and David Ciavatta are both professors of philosophy at Ryerson University, where Jehangir did their undergraduate studies. In their published work and in their teaching, they explore the role of emotions and the family in forming the selfhood of a person. They're also interested in the question of how bodies allow us to connect with other people and with our surrounding environment. Jehangir was drawn to them as a student because of their philosophical focus, and over the years he spoke of them as friends. This dual relationship as both friend and teacher and mentor, and as people who touched him personally, places them in a special position to speak about his engagement with philosophy. So we really thanks so much for.
That's rather daunting because I think there's actually lots of people here who've really experienced philosophy with Jehangir and would have lots to say about that. But when Niomi and Alex initially asked me to talk, I was considering the various things that I might say. One option was to talk about philosophical ideas that Jehangir was interested in, but the thing that was so striking to me that I really wanted to speak to was what a philosophical soul Jehangir was, just what a wise person he was. And so I thought I'd try to introduce that by retelling a part of one of the origin stories of philosophy, which is the story of Socrates. Socrates' friend, Chaerephon, went to the oracle one day and asked the oracle, "Is there anyone wiser than Socrates?" And the oracle said, "No, no one is wiser." So Chaerephon brought this news back to Socrates, and Socrates said, "This can't possibly be true. This must be a riddle. I need to understand this." And so he set out to ask questions to try to clarify what the meaning of this riddle from the oracle was. And so what he did was he went around to all the people who were taken to be the wise people, first the politicians, then the poets, and then the craftspeople, and asked them about the things that they knew about. And in asking them, discovered that they didn't really know what they claimed to know, that they were putting on great pretenses at being wise, but were not in fact wise. The craftsmen at least, so the politicians were just windbags. The poets at least could write poetry, but they couldn't understand what their poetry meant. The craftspeople at least actually understood their craft, but they supposed that because they had that knowledge, they also had other knowledge that they didn't have. So Socrates' conclusion was, I am the wisest in this respect, that I know when I do not know, whereas these other people don't. So Socrates, the originator of philosophy, is really an emblem of humility, but also great wisdom and insight, and also a questioner. So I wanted to just draw some analogies there with Jehangir. And let me say a little bit more about Socrates' story. So it turns out that because he went around questioning all the politicians, especially, and the poets, and showing them up for not knowing what they were talking about, people became very, very unhappy with him and eventually put him to death, claiming that he was corrupting the youth and sort of meddling, subverting the status quo. So one big disanalogy between Jehangir and Socrates is that Jehangir may have pissed off a few people by asking questions. He certainly surprised people, I think. And he made them think things that they hadn't thought before by asking his questions. That's like Socrates. But he really asked his questions in a different way from Socrates, I think. Jehangir asked questions in the most open-hearted way, which I take to be fundamental to philosophy. So philosophy, I think, tries to understand things without assumptions, without assuming in advance what the answers are to their questions. And I think that's really how Jehangir approached philosophy, but also how he approached talking with everybody. He asked genuine questions, and they made you stop and think about things you'd never thought about before. The other side of that, though, is that Jehangir himself had clearly lived his life asking himself questions like that. And so he was a person of deep insight. And Niomi was talking about the intimacy workshop that we were at, where we were talking about philosophers' views on intimacy and trying to figure those out and struggling to articulate our ideas. And Jehangir spoke up with an example that I think knocked a bunch of us over, basically, in that workshop, and that has really stuck with me. And he said, well, here's a way of thinking about what intimacy is. I notice that when I'm alone in my hospital room, it feels barren and empty and not at all like a home. But when this particular person, this girlfriend that he had at the time, comes into the room, she totally transforms it. It becomes the most wonderful place in the world, a real home, a place filled with significance where I want to be. And so he proposed this as sort of an emblem for us to think about what intimacy is, that it's people being able to have that kind of transformation in our lives. And I think this was in the context of many professional philosophers being there. I think that everybody felt like this had really opened their eyes to something. So I guess the last thing that I want to say is that I think there are many professional philosophers who are not philosophical in the sense that Jehangir was. I think there are many people who are like the politicians that Socrates questioned, that they think that they know when in fact they don't know. And so there's Jehangir died at a very young age, but there's a way in which he was wiser than many great old people who've lived long. And so I leave that with you.
Hi everyone. My name is David Ciavatta. I'm also at Ryerson University, and I met Jehangir about 8 years ago or so when I first started at Ryerson. He took a class for me, and suddenly he started showing up in my office hours all the time, and, asking lots of really probing questions, and so that's where our relationship started. And he just was a very, he was sort of one of those students that doesn't really come around very often when one's life as a teacher, and so we really spent a lot of time together for a few years, and talking in my office and just walking around Ryerson and walking around parks and whatever else, yeah, I really felt like, I was thinking about this in coming here. I'm here because I was his teacher, but there's also a way in which I really feel that there's something weird about that. Like, so, I do think of him as a friend, but I think also I feel like he taught me a lot of things. And, as teachers, we're supposed to say that our students teach us things. But I think in Jehangir's case, it's actually true. I really feel like, I think just because he was so committed to just thinking things through, it was hard to get away with saying anything unclear in front of him, and that's always, you need people like that around when you're trying to clarify your own thoughts and when you just want to make some progress on questions. So I noticed recently I walk around campus at Ryerson and feel like I miss him. I feel like I associate certain street corners with him, and I kind of half expect to see him, and so I feel like lately I've been feeling his absence in a little more profound way. I wanted to say just a couple of things about a paper that Jehangir wrote. Some of you probably have read this, maybe even many times, but I figured probably most people here don't know much about it, and so I thought I would just say a couple things about it, because I was reading it over again recently, and I think it's an excellent paper, and I kind of lost track of. I think it's published somewhere. Maybe someone knows, but certainly it should be published. It's an excellent piece of work, and I think would be beneficial for a lot of people to read. So I thought I would just tell you about this paper. It's called "The Experience of the Body in Chronic Illness," and this is a paper that Jehangir was working on, for a few years, really, or a couple of years, kind of off and on, and it was I think a paper that he presented an early version of at a conference in England, and I wasn't there, and so maybe you guys can talk about the social side of that. but in front of the paper, it sounded like it went really well. I think people were probably had to have been surprised at this 23-year-old. I don't know how old he was exactly at the time, but just standing up there and saying these sorts of things, it must have been shocking. I think that's a common experience with Jehangir, is that how could this guy know so much and be so thoughtful? But so I just wanted to tell you a little bit about this paper, because it's interesting, and I thought it might be interesting for you if you just wanted a glimpse into that side of Jehangir's life. So the paper's about chronic illness, and I guess maybe the most important thing to say about it from the start is that he's asking a philosophical question. So he's asking the question, what does it mean to be chronically ill? Which I think is already just a very important question. It's not a medical question. It's not like, what is the nature of an illness? That's something that the medical establishment can answer in some ways. Identifying what the nature of the bodily problem is that someone is suffering, maybe even from a chemical perspective or something like that. So he's not asking that kind of question. He's asking, what does it mean for a human being to have a chronic illness? Like, what is it like as a human being to live with a chronic illness? And I think that's such a wise question to ask. I mean, I think there's just that question alone says so much about, it says, frames this paper, but it also says so much about his approach to dealing with various issues. His idea is that being sick can have a meaning, right? I mean, that idea is pretty important just in and of itself, right? To be sick is not just an absence of something. It's not just a lack. It can actually have a meaning, and it's something that you can explore and think about and try to get more deeply into. And I think one of the sides of this paper that's interesting is that he addresses the question of what it is to have a human body. And so his starting point is to ask, we just sort of assume that we have bodies, and we do, and we use them all the time without even thinking about them. But again, there's this question of what does it mean to have a body, and what is it like to have a body? And so one of the biggest points he makes about that is just to say that the body's something that you have without really noticing it, right? When the body's working well, it's precisely something you don't notice, right? You do things with it all the time, but you're not really focused on the body, you're focused on the things that you're involved in. If you're walking towards a bus stop and you see the bus coming, you just start running. You don't have to stop and look at your body and tell it what to do. It's almost like your body's already starts by itself, right? Your body's kind of in the background, and you generally don't think about it. I mean, right now I'm a little conscious because you're all looking at me, but for the most part, I'm just moving my hands and I'm looking at you. I'm more where you are than, conscious of my body itself. But the thing about being very ill, and particularly with chronic illnesses that are recur and can't be overcome in some sense. There's a way in which your body constantly reminds you that it's there, and becomes a part of your life and requires that you address it. In Jehangir's case, especially on a daily basis and multiple times a day. And so part of what he tries to explore is that what is it to be a human being who doesn't have that ability to just forget one's body, which is maybe the thing we're most used to. What is it to be a human being who can't forget that, but who has to constantly address one's body again and again? And I think that's the main issue that this paper addresses. And it's not a very happy paper. I mean, part of the conclusion is that there's something, I think, whereas most of us feel at one with our body and feel like more or less it just disappears, the chronically ill person has to try to still strive for that kind of experience, but can never get there. So they're kind of stuck in an attempt to try to forget the body, but can't quite forget it. And that was an issue that I think Jehangir was really exploring towards the end of his life. Can I reach a point where should I just live in a different way to try to find a way of reconciling myself to my body and to its limits? And I think that was a struggle that he was having, that I imagine anyone would have at that point in one's life of how do I address this situation of having a body that's not cooperating with all the things that I would like it to do. And I think at some points Jehangir was thinking that maybe he could reconcile himself to that, and my impression was that maybe towards the last part of his life he thought that maybe just the nature of that kind of problem is that you can't fix it, you can't reconcile oneself to it. And I think there's it's a sad, tragic realization, but I also think it's a very profound one to realize. Like I think people can perhaps assume that any problem they face is one they could overcome, and reconcile themselves to, and sometimes the realization that there are certain kinds of problems that can't be fully overcome is something that requires a genuine tragic wisdom to accept. So so I read this paper with some regret and some sadness too, of course, because this is a paper about human beings and what it is to have a body. It's not about Jehangir, but I read it with always with the presence of Jehangir in the background, of course, and I see in this paper a philosophical struggle that I think anybody here could make sense of and appreciate, because we all have bodies, and so we're all asking those kinds of questions, I think, at some level. But also I see in this paper Jehangir's struggle, and it seems like a very profound and noble one. So I feel honored to be able to talk about it. So thank you.
Thanks again. So I'm going to call up Harris, Salmah, and Alex, and who else is Jivraj, Alim, Jivraj. So these individuals are all going to give you a small piece of poetry, some of which I believe was written by Jehangir. And Imran. And then we will be merry.
Poem into the future. It is not that we have changed. I hesitate to use wisdom, but it's something. Strength or love has lifted us, carried us into our future. They are wrong. We have no goals, no dreams, no successes. Time is pointless, death inevitable. But when you hold me, I get back everything I have lost. Only in our stories and poems, only in our moments, will my life move forward. Thinking, I have achieved. I am protected from death. In your arms, my life has an end. In your arms, I am carried into the future.
Hi everyone. My name is Alim Jivraj. Jehangir was my best friend, and I knew him, I don't even know how many years I knew him for. I met him as a kid while swimming, and I think we were swimming and Jasmine was there, I think, and my brother was there, and I met them while they were bickering in Kachi at some point, and so I figured that they were a smiley. Or they just really liked the smileys. And so, I mean, I've known him for so many years that I don't even know. So, I mean, he took me to see Lord of the Rings once. I mean, we did a lot of things together. Me and my wife moved downtown about 2 years ago now, and so we've been, we saw him a lot more actually. He came over to our house all the time, and we used to hang out, and he used to call me up at like 8 o'clock at night and say, hey, you want to go out? And I said, well, I got work the next day. But he kind of understood that, but not really, because it's Jehangir. So he wasn't just my best friend, but he's also like a brother to me. Over time, he became a part of our family. I don't remember how many years I know him for, because in the end, time doesn't really make a difference. It's really just the connections that we make and the experiences that we share. So I wanted to share a little bit of our relationship with you and the relationship we both created. I'm going to read a few email excerpts and a card that he wrote, both me and then another card he wrote my wife, Tanaz. February 27, 2013. Just randomly, out of the blue, he said, hey, I miss you guys. I have 15 applesauces for you and Tanaz, and maybe a couple of puddings for you. I kind of miss the Jivraj household, especially the bath. So I know someone from St. Mike's was here, so he used to give us apple puddings or applesauce and chocolate puddings all the time. We had our fridge full of them at some point. It's tax money going to us, which is great. And he didn't like the bath there. He didn't like the shower very much there. So he said, come over all the time and use our shower. At nighttime. This guy used to come at 10 o'clock at night. We had work the next day, but he would come at 10 o'clock at night. So it was fine. It was really cool when he came over. So Jehangir came over that day, took a bath at our place, and we watched some TV with us, and then we gave him an orange to keep his sugar levels up, and he was on his way home. December 17th, 2012. Me and my wife were going to India for a trip, for a family trip, and so randomly out of the blue, he wrote us an email and said, all right, you two, please have a safe trip. Don't get robbed or killed in India. Tanaz, make sure Alim is okay. I'm excited to cook food for you when you guys get back. Celebrate hard, take care of each other, Love a lot. Life is short and fragile, and happiness comes and goes. Make these days and moments come alive as best as you can. So we went to India, we enjoyed ourselves, and we thought of him when we had a good time. July 25th, 2012. In preparation for dinner he was cooking us, so just a little bit of pretext to that, we got married, and his present to us was, I think, 6 dinners. 6, really, really fancy dinners. And this guy knew how to cook. But the problem with him is that Jehangir's an academic, and no offense to the academics, but they like to take a little bit of time. So this guy would come over at 5 o'clock, 5 o'clock, go to St. Lawrence Market at 5. We're hungry, we just came home from work. By 8 o'clock, he'd start cooking. It would take about 2-3 hours, so by the time we actually ate, it was 11 o'clock on a Friday night. So in preparation for dinner he was cooking us, he sent an email and ended it by saying, "Thanks for making me a part of your family in this way. Please allow me to interact with your potential future children." I replied back and said, "Well, every family has a crazy uncle. That's how we will introduce you to our kids at age 18. Joking. So I also told him in that email the work was kind of crazy. So he wrote, "Please take care of yourself at work. Do you want me to make you some lunch? Or rather, I can make you some lunches. I promise no vegetables," because he knew how much I hated vegetables. But good food though, regardless. But the funny part was, he lived in a hospital room for a lot of the time that we knew him for towards the end. And somehow I knew that because we were in trouble, he would figure it out. He would make us a sandwich, he would fry us some chicken. I don't know how he did that, but he did that somehow. And he would figure it out. So for Tanaz's birthday, he wrote her a special card with the following excerpt. "Dear Tanaz, I have felt very proud these past few years to feel a part of your family you're making with Alim." So it was really nice because he became kind of our son. Pseudo-son, expensive pseudo-son. I'm sure you guys know that though. For my birthday, he gave me these really fancy socks. He knew I was trying hard to be a hipster, so I was learning from him. Jehangir is the original hipster. And so I remember looking at his, so he gave me these really, really fancy socks. I don't know how much they cost, but they look really expensive. But one day I went to Khane, which is our mosque, and I remember looking at his socks, and they had a lot of holes. So I wanted to say, "Jehangir, why did you spend this much money on buying me expensive socks when you clearly need socks more than I do?" But then I stopped and I realized that Jehangir is selfless. And buying me socks it makes him more happy. And it makes him more happy doing things for others than buying him his own things. So it's the Jehangir way of doing things. So I didn't say anything anymore. But he did write me a really nice card, and I want to read it to you. "My dear Alim, these last 2 years have been really difficult for me. But when I ask myself what has gone better from the bottom of my heart, what has brought me happiness and fulfillment, our friendship really stands out. You have been a brother, a confidant, a caregiver, and an incredible friend to me. You really helped change my experience of my illness and improve my life. Thank you, Alim, and have a happy birthday. I hope you feel that you have a lot to celebrate." So as you can see, Jehangir and I had a very unique relationship. Some would call it borderline homosexual. I met him as a kid during swimming classes while he was bickering and kutchy with his mom. I'm lucky to have had him in my life, and I have no doubt his memory will continue on with not just me, but all of us. Thank you.
Definitely a different perspective from what I said. So hello everyone, my name's Harris. For those that don't know me, I'm one of Jehangir's, probably one of his oldest friends. I've known him since kindergarten, grade 1. So I'm just going to read because this is like one of the tough things to do. So I don't know Jasmine and I don't know Kareem, I don't know where you guys are. But who I do know is Jossie and I do know Kareem Puff. So I knew these guys by their nicknames. I see the family, the wonderful family that lives at 3 Mendip Crescent as an extension of my own. So I drop in, say hi to these guys, and then forget that I actually came to see Jehangir. We'd have tea with them and leave. And on my way home, I'd be like, oh, wait a second. So I have numerous emails, poems, messages, thoughts, stories, tons of stories. Probably I shouldn't be up here because of that. That I've amassed over the years with my interactions with Jehangir. So it's been tough choosing something to reflect on because I was supposed to choose a poem or something that reflected him. So I have a few snippets from emails throughout the years. So one thing Jay taught me was, he said in an email, "Do as the Islamic mystic Rumi says, do not follow others and create your own myth." Now, I have known to be the person that asks the devil's advocate questions. I've always done one of those things, and Jehangir taught me that. And that's something Jehangir believed in dearly. He urged me to form a new and interesting friendships, question things, find a girlfriend. I'm married now. And take chances. He told me to take chances always. He said to me, friend people whom you can create and relate to spiritually, emotionally. For as far as I'm convinced, that's really the only way we can be happy and really the only thing worth living for. Other than this whole life as a test thing, he said. He taught me, we must not forget that all struggles, in a sense, are struggles of mortality. Think back to who you were a year ago, 6 months ago, 10 minutes ago, sitting over there. Have you changed or improved, he said to me. If the answer is no, I would begin to question your existence. In these times of war, he said to me, all we can do is hope, he said. All we must do is remember to evolve as individuals, preferably in a positive way, because him and I, positive and negative were a big thing. And if you, Harris, he said to me, are staying the same, let's face it, you're a doorknob. So I chose a poem that he sent to me a while ago, and it's called A Song with No End. It goes, when Whitman wrote, I sing the body electric, I know what he meant. I know what he wanted. To be alive every moment, in spite of the inevitable. We cannot cheat death, but we can make it work so hard that when it does take us, it will have known a victory just as perfect as our own. That's by Charles Bukowski. I can't pronounce that. So I close with, he says to me, so Harris, find your victory, make it perfect. I am consistently achieving mine. And that's how I've known Jehangir.
Hi everybody, my name is Alex. I've known Jehangir for a few years, and one of the things we often did together was read poetry. I'm not going to read something he wrote, but I'm going to read one of his favorites. I know that this poem brought him a sense of comfort, and it's a fairly peaceful poem, so I'd like to share it. It's called Wild Geese by Mary Oliver. So, you do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about your despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clean blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over, announcing your place in the family of things. So, thank you.
Thanks, guys. To say a final word, and thank you to all of you, I wanted to call up my uncle, Mansoor. He's much more eloquent than me and than most of our family, so he's probably the right person to say a couple words. And then after this, as Jehangir would say, please be merry, eat, and we'll have some music.
So just relax, the food will come later. It's not running away. So it's been a long time preparing for this. It's been about 3 months. We thought we would do this right after the first 14 days when Jehangir passed away. And then it was too busy, so we said we'll wait for a few more months. And then the time came, and all of a sudden we're here. So we thought, what would be the best way for this to be? Be sunny, bird chirping, we'd be out in the grass where Jehangir used to live with his parents. But it turns out that it was raining, we were all upset with each other, we were planning what to do, and what should we do about what happens. And it reminded me of Jehangir's last few days. Things weren't working well, his lungs weren't functioning well, so the doctors, and Dr. Stephenson's gone away, they were thinking about proning him. Proning is when you turn somebody upside down. It's like, sunny side up, but the other way around. And the way you do that is because that the lungs are free floating, and this way, perhaps they can breathe better, and you can improve. They thought about doing that about a week before. It was so difficult to do, so dangerous to do, they decided not to. And then it was a last-ditch effort. 3 days before, we said, now or never. So we said, okay, we'll prone. And I remember them going out to Mississauga to get the bed. It's a very special bed. And there were all these people. I'm sure Jehangir would have loved the attention. But you have Jehangir here within, he's got a tracheostomy in place, he's got the tube in his throat, the machines are running, and there are 7 people trying to turn him around. Imagine how that is. It's not like turning yourself around in the middle of the bed, in the middle of the night. So we did this, and then we waited. A day, 2 days. And after 2 days, things didn't work out well. So what we told ourselves is, we did our best. And the most important part of life is giving it your best, and thereafter letting it be. And I think part of that is also today. So this rainy weather, and to think about it, it is what it is. And we would have had a better day maybe out in the sunshine, but there is a famous philosopher that I was listening to the other day. His name is Thich Nhat Hanh. Thich Nhat Hanh is a Zen master Buddhist philosopher who said misery and, in a way, unhappiness is part of life. And what he says is, and I wrote this down, he says, have you ever seen a lotus? Do you know where the lotus grows? It grows in mud. Without mud, there is no lotus. And the feeling is, he says, Thich Nhat Hanh goes on to say, without suffering, you have no way of understanding and being compassionate. And I think the reason you heard so many people talk about Jehangir's compassion is because they suffered from the beginning of life to the end of life. But those who suffer can realize the value of compassion and love and life as a whole. So for those of us who may not have suffered enough, I think you should prepare yourself a little bit more, no pain, no gain. And I think part of this is I learned from Thich Nhat Hanh to say that, by the way, you're right. A lotus does not exist without mud. And I think when I think about it, in Islam, we do not have eulogies. When you go to a funeral, you just come, the coffin, you say prayers, and the person's buried. As a physician, I go to many funerals. In a way, I participate in many people's deaths in many ways. My inability to help them leads them invariably to their death. So I usually go and visit many funerals. And in most Christian funerals, I love to go because you hear about the person you did not know very much, the person you knew as a patient, but now you get to hear about them as a human being. And you love what they tell about the patients, but always in afterlife. In Islam, in our faith, there is no eulogy. So I wondered, why is it that there are no eulogies? We should be talking about people after they die, at least so that people may remember. And then I realized that the eulogies that we miss are exactly these people. For us, Jehangir was like a lotus. He converted mud, you would not see the mud. And my philosophy is that in our life, we will carry on his life. In the last 3 months that have gone about, my feeling is, have we changed in any way? Have I changed in any way? And the only way to remember Jehangir is not to say good things about him and his life, but more importantly, to live his life in yourself in his own little way. Either because you're more compassionate today than you were yesterday, either because you read more poetry today than you did yesterday, or you're kinder, gentler, maybe cooking food for somebody else, or going to use somebody else's shower yesterday than you did not do. Whatever you do, if he lives in you, then he will live forever, because otherwise he will be gone. And I ask myself, many of my patients tell me, my loved one died. Every day I remember him, I remember her. It's a painful memory. And I'm afraid that when I stop remembering, that person will be gone. So I keep on remembering because I'm afraid not to remember, because the day I forget to remember, that person will disappear. I think in our philosophy, you do not have to remember somebody to keep them alive. Be who you are, but take them in your life. Be like Jehangir would have been in your own self. And therein is his memory. So for Jasmine and Karim and my brother and Leila, it is important to remember, and I'm sure you will remember, just like the philosopher said, every corner reminds me of Jehangir's conversation. But the best way to remember is to be what he would have been, and I find it grateful that there's a little collection box outside. We'll be collecting money for those charities that Jehangir worked on. So I think, and I tell myself also, that the way to remember him the most is the way to be able to live his life in my own life in some way. So I will end very quickly. Aga Khan III, about 50 years ago, talked about struggle is the meaning of life. Defeat or victory is in the hands of God, but just the struggle itself is a man's duty and should be our joy. I think nobody better than Jehangir embodied this from the day get-go. He was born in the ICU, he died in the ICU. Struggle was constantly a way of life for him. But there is no lotus without mud. And that lotus that converts mud to feel like a fragrant flower is a real lotus. So we celebrate him today, and the way we should remember him is the way that he left us be. Be compassionate, be kind, be generous. So in doing so, we will always have his memory in our heart. We have a tree that we wanted to plant behind Jamil's house, and obviously it's too rainy today. But inshallah, every year when you come to visit Jamil, that tree will blossom, you'll leave a message. It is not the lotus because we don't have enough mud. I think we are not that bad at mud, so I think we couldn't choose a lotus. We clearly have green grass. But my philosophy is come, visit, live in his memory, and do good deeds. And I would leave you with a few little words from Taknin Khan, because I thought they were very inspirational. He says, to breathe in and to know that you are alive is a signal of life. Suffering, understanding the nature of suffering, is a part of living. Without suffering, you have no way of understanding and being compassionate. The kingdom of God is not one where there is no suffering.
Our grandmother
Nice to see you. You okay out here?
I just don't know if
Don't get me eating.
you know, what time they're coming. Hi.
Hi. Oh wow. Let's see. Very good.
Make a compliment, right?
So one did the top, you did the front, and one you did the back of your hand.
I wanted mine to last longer. You know, like tattoos wear off the fastest if they're on the top of your hand.
Just know that.
Very good.
Learning all the time.
It's only going to last a couple of days.
I know, but it'll last a little bit longer.
Okay, fair.
It should be right around here.
You gonna get food? Alright. Let's get some food.
Karina, how's the food?
I haven't eaten it yet.
Oh, you haven't eaten
But
it
it
yet.
looks
Let's
delicious.
see. Okay.
And it's all
Well, we have to come back after.
Yes.
Are you vegetarian?
Yes.
Oh,
So this is
wonderful.
beautiful. I don't have to question what's in it.
That's great.
Imagine you've already said
How are you?
Hi, Yelly. Good. How are you?
Good to see you.
Thanks. You too.
There is no good place to stand here. So I wanted to introduce Erin. Erin is, or was, or is, one of Johnny's good friends. And she's just going to take us through, I will let her explain, but she's going to take us through a small exercise that'll hopefully set the tone for what I promise will be a great performance very shortly. Erin.
Good afternoon, everyone. So lovely to be here with all of you, sharing the love for Jehangir and feeling the love that he filled us with, of course. Excuse me. I'm one of his friends with cystic fibrosis. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay. So we've had lots of conversations about breath over the years and have tried to bring it into a practice where, no matter how strong or how slight our breath is, that the in-breath can bring peace, excuse me, and the exhale can bring a sense of softening, letting go, and freedom. So I'm just going to go through, bring everyone through a bit of a body scan to relax, and then go through a bit of a visualization that Jehangir and I used to do, working with light and water in our bodies as healing sources, and finally some loving kindness meditation, and then we'll be on with the rest of this lovely afternoon. So I'm not going to use a microphone, so if you can't hear me, please just speak up right away and I'll pick up the mic if I need to, okay? Thanks. So I just invite everybody to sit down if possible, either on a chair or the floor. If you can't do that comfortably, if there isn't enough room, then just stand and work your feet into the ground, feeling solid. And you may want to keep your eyes open if you're standing, just so it's against the rules to fall over. Okay. So I invite everyone to close their eyes and just notice your breath, not changing it, not trying to control it, just noticing where it's at. You might notice that there's an ease to it. Perhaps there's tension. You might feel tightness around your chest. Lungs are the area where grief resides. And those of us, well, we're all feeling grief. So I invite you to just bring your awareness to your head, noticing any sensation there. With an in-breath, feeling peace, and with an out-breath, just relaxing and softening any muscles in the head and face. Breathing in, bringing peace through your cheek muscles, your jaw. Breathing out, softening and releasing all tension. Breathing in, noticing the collarbones and shoulders. Noticing the neck, often tight. With a deep exhale, just release all tension. So breathing in and exhale out. In And release that tension. Inhaling, noticing the chest. Is there tightness there? Can you feel your breath in the upper lobes of the lungs? Can you notice it further down? Does your rib cage expand with your breath? Inhaling, notice. Exhale, soften, creating space. Bringing awareness to the internal organs, the pancreas, liver, kidneys, intestines, spleen. Breathing in with gratitude for their functioning. Breathing out, just softening. Bringing our awareness to the reproductive organs. Grateful for their health. Exhaling and softening. Bringing awareness to the large muscles of the legs, the glutes, your quads, and the front of your leg, and your hamstrings. Big muscles that work hard to carry us. Breathing in, peace. Breathing out, just softening and releasing any tension in those muscles. Bringing awareness to the hips. Allowing space and energy to enter them with the inhale. And with the exhale, releasing. Noticing the knees. What's in there today? As you exhale, soften and notice. Bringing your attention to the calf muscles and the shins, often tight from walking. Breathing in, exhaling, in gratitude, and exhaling softness. Down to the feet that ground us to the earth. Connect us with the earth's energy. Breathing in, breathing out, soften and release. Spend a few moments just noticing your breath. When your mind wanders, as it has the nature to do, just kindly bring it back. Bring back the attention to your breath with gratitude. Our bodies are made of mostly water. We can connect to this source of healing anytime as it's running through our veins, running through our bodies, around our organs. Beginning at the feet. Just visualize a stream of light and water. With each inhale, it gains energy. With each exhale, it cleanses and heals. Breathing in, The stream is flowing through your legs. Feeling light, warming your legs, softening your muscles, relaxing, water cleansing, purifying, nurturing, nourishing. Now following that stream of light and water through the pelvis and the reproductive organs into the abdomen. Bringing healing light and warmth, softening, relaxing. The water is nourishing, it's lubricating the joints. The next inhale, visualize that stream of light and water pulsing through the intestines. For those of us with CF and for many others, the intestines are continually experiencing blockages, interfering with our well-being. Inhaling light and water pulsing through, cleansing. Exhaling, allowing softness. Inhaling light and water pulsing through our intestines, healing, cleansing. Exhaling, softness. Stream of light and water makes its way up the spine. Spinal column lubricating, energizing, strengthening our torso. Allowing us to be upright. Breathing in, feeling that cleansing, healing energy. Breathing out, softening of the nerves. Allowing the body to heal. In, cleansing energy. Out, softening and healing. We see the stream moving into our lungs. Pulsing around, stirring up, almost like the waves of the ocean crashing on the beach. Moving our mucus, creating space for breath. Cleansing the bacteria, allowing breath, allowing healing. Breathing in, the stream moves into the middle lobe. Cleansing, pulsing, invigorating. Feeling our breath expand, feeling the rib cage expand. Exhaling with gratitude. Inhaling stream of light and cleansing water into our upper lobes. Clearing the gunk from our chest, flowing out of the airways, liquefying. Inhaling peace, exhaling freedom. Inhaling peace, exhaling freedom. Stream of nourishing light and water flows into our sinus cavities, again cleansing mucus, cleansing the bacteria, allowing space. Release the intention in the muscles of the head. Inhaling peace, exhaling freedom. Our body is alive, feeling energized, feeling nourished. Begin to wiggle your fingers and toes. Feeling the energy return to all limbs and the inner core of the body. Grateful for the nourishment. This is a loving kindness meditation that Jehangir and I often practiced, because as we had so much love for everyone, sometimes the love for ourselves is not that strong. May I be well. May I be free. May I love myself and all. May I know peace and ease of breath. May I be well. May I be free. May I love myself and all. May I know peace and ease of breath. I ask you to join in. May I be well. May I be free. May I love myself and all. May I know peace and ease of breath. May I be well. May I be free. May I love myself and all. May I know peace and ease of breath. May I be well. May I be free. May I love myself and all. May I know peace and ease of breath. Once more, this is offered out to Jehangir's family. And it's, may you be well. May you be free. May you love yourself and all.
All people who are parked on the road. This is a warning. They are giving tickets once again to all people who are parked on the road. They are giving tickets.
Okay. May you know peace and ease of breath. May you be well. May you be free. May you love yourself and all. May you know peace and ease of breath. May you be well.
May you be free.
May you love yourself and all. May you know
peace and ease of breath.